Good afternoon. This call is hosted by the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities. The speakers are Catherine Blakemore, Executive Director of Disability Rights California, and Dr. Olivia Rayner, Director of the Tarzan Center, a University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Both are members of the State Council. They are joined by Mark Pollitt, Deputy Director of Policy and Planning at the State Council. The participant lines will be held on mute during the presenter's initial remarks. Then all lines will be open for questions and comments. Now I am turning the call over to the presenters.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I want to just before we provide some framing of the issues and solutions, just give you a little sense of the protocol we're going to follow, which is, as the conference operator indicated, once we're done, then the lines will be open. But we're going to ask people sort of in groups of 5 to indicate who would like to make a comment so that we can sort of orderly incorporate everybody's input into the conference. And we're also going to ask that you limit your remarks to 2 to 3 minutes. And it would be helpful if you identify yourself by your first and your last name so that we can know how many people are participating and who's been participating. So that's the process that we'll use. We also know that people may be joining the call periodically, and so if it looks like there's a period of time when lots of additional people have joined, we'll do a short summary of the purpose of the call and our remarks and remind people of the process again, just so that people coming on a bit later will have a sense of what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a little background as to what's happening at the State DD Council, and then Olivia will also provide some information about the issues, and then I'll begin talking about some of the items that are being considered by the Council as a solution. So as you might know, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities is funded federally, and the agency that's responsible for the State Council is the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And they have responsibility for monitoring the activities of the Council. And periodically, AIDD will come to California or to another state and do what's called a monitoring and technical assistance review. So just a little over a year ago, they came to California and they did a review. I know that some of you who've been on the call were people that participated in the review. And then in November of this year, they issued a report to California, which found that California was not in compliance with all of the activities and responsibilities it has under the state plan. And so what AIDD has required is that California develop a corrective action plan, and that they submit that plan by Friday, February 14th to AIDD. And AIDD will then look at it and determine if that plan will bring California back into compliance. So that's the process that we're in, and what the Council's interested in doing is discussing the specific issues that brought the Council out of compliance, some preliminary thinking about the kinds of steps the Council can take to come back into compliance, and then we want to hear from all of you as to what your ideas are about what the Council needs to do. When I'm talking about compliance, what it means is the federal government would say, you aren't following the rules that we have set up for councils. What are you going to do to change so that you will be following the rules as the federal government identifies them? So we're really just here to talk about what are some solutions to address the issues that the federal government has raised relative to California State DD Council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia, who's going to identify some of the things that the AIDD said California wasn't following.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon to listen in and for us to hear from you regarding the federal review of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And as Catherine was mentioning, the AIDD came to California and reviewed the work of the council and identified 4 areas of corrective actions that are needed for us to be in compliance with federal law. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the 4 key areas that were identified. And broadly, they are budget, hiring staff, membership, and state council leadership. So in the area of budget, the questions that arose had to do with how we create a budget and allocate our funds. And specifically, the AIDD indicated that that we needed a corrective action plan that addressed that the state cannot tell the council how much of its funds to allocate to give to the area boards. That we needed to follow federal rules and do a better job of explaining the process that we use for budgeting. And we needed to do a better job explaining how we spend our dollars. In the second area, hiring authority, under federal law, the State Council on Developmental Disability is to operate as an independent agency and in this way have the authority to hire its own staff. So changes that are required include that the State Council Director must hire the directors of the area boards and that the governor cannot hire our staff. In the third area, membership, talks about some of the issues related to the process and timelines for appointments to the council. We have a timeliness issue here in California in that council member positions are not always filled in a timely manner. Secondly, the nomination process, that the members of the council may not be area board members, that presents a potential conflict of interest to the feds. And in the last area, state council leadership and activities. As a unified agency, meaning that the state council works in concert and is, in essence, is one agency with its area boards, that it is important that as we communicate our state plan and the work that we do, that we operate as one entity. And as such, it is the council and its state plan that directs the work of the area offices. There was questions about overlap between the work of our protection and advocacy agency, Disability Rights California, and some of the advocacy activities carried out by our area boards. Also, there is a necessity for stronger accountability by the council, and which really means our state plan in terms of the kinds of work that the area boards carry out. And that there needs to be greater clarity in terms of council activities versus those activities that are carried out by the state council. So with this overview of some of the key findings, I'm going to be turning it now to Mark Pollitt, who will talk about some of the processes for addressing the corrective action plan.
Thanks, Olivia. This was a lot for us to respond to and requires a bit of process on the part of the council. And the council is a council appointed by the governor, and so it's the governor's council, and we represent the interests of the people of California. So, you know, our process has to be significant in terms of how we go about it. We got this report shortly before the holidays, and immediately did a lot of staff work initially. And then in January, we convened, the chair of the council convened what we call an MTARS committee. And MTARS is the acronym for the report we received from the feds. On this committee, we have key members of the council, such as the chair and the vice chair and the chair of the administration committee. We have Catherine and Olivia on the committee, and we also have representatives from the administration and the governor's office. And so this is a good group of people to tackle the issues. In January, we met 3 times and worked through all of the issues that Olivia outlined. And we're coming up, the committee came up with recommendations for the executive committee of the council to consider. Now, the executive committee is meeting tomorrow, and the input that people will give on the phone today will be summarized for the executive committee to hear in their deliberations. The executive committee will finalize a response, because our response, as has been mentioned, is due at the end of this week on Valentine's Day, the 14th. Some of the items in our response must be preliminary, because ultimately the council as a whole has to decide on what we will do in response to these items. And there'll be more opportunities for community input between now and March 20th when the council meets. And also, the council will also take community input when they meet on March 20th. We are hoping that on March 20th, the council will make final decisions on what our path forward will be. And as we go forward, I want to mention that there'll be information available on this process on the council's website, and the council's website is SCDD, which stands for State Council on Developmental Disabilities, so scdd.ca.gov. And once you get to the council's homepage, you can click on the link to the MTARS committee, and you will see all of the documents that have been generated so far and will be generated in the future. You can also give input by email to MTARS, which is M as in Mark, T as in Tom, A as in Apple, R as in report, and S as in Sam, at scdd.ca.gov, or you can call the council and ask for Roberta Newton, the interim executive director, or myself, Mark, at 916-322-8481. And we'll give this information later on in the call too. And just as a reminder, this call is being recorded, and this call will be put up on the MTARS webpage also, so people can review it in the future too. Now I'll turn it back to Catherine.
So I'm going to just give a brief summary of some of the ways that we have identified so far for the council to comply with what the federal government wants us to do. So what are the ways we need to change, and what are some of the things that are going to remain the same? So the first is that we're going to clarify that it's the council that establishes the organizational structure, which means that no longer in state statute will it identify that certain positions have to exist, deputy director positions, at the council offices, but that the council will decide what positions does it need, and that was important to AIDD. Second is that we will continue to have a local presence, because AIDD and every member of the council believes that it is important to have regional offices of the council, because California is so diverse geographically, ethnically, in terms of languages spoken, that it wouldn't be possible to have a council that just had an office in Sacramento. But we're going to do a better job of ensuring that the area boards, what we call area boards now, are better integrated with the state council, and that we work together as one entity. We're also going to ensure the involvement of consumers and families at the regional level by transforming appointed area boards to state council regional advisory committees. That will help ensure that families and consumers at the local level have a way to participate in the work of the council, which is, again, very important.
Also, I need a new chair. I need a new chair.
Okay, somebody just muted. Okay, just hold on. We're going to get to comments in a minute. And the council and its regional offices will continue to perform its functions that are required by the DD Act and state law. We're also going to be, we've also thought of some changes in state council membership that will better be in compliance with the federal DD Act. We're going to ensure that a member of the council can remain a member until there is a replacement name for them. So one of the things that was identified by Olivia is that sometimes there are delays in getting the council members appointed, and that creates problems for the council to function. So we will.
And then he's wrong. They didn't know because it was an open.
Someone, I'm sorry. I think there's someone who might be speaking to someone else or something. So if you could mute your phone, that would be really helpful. Thank you. We're also going to create a better process for working with the governor's office to ensure that vacancies can be filled more timely, including giving the governor's office 6 months in advance notice of the expiration of a council's member's term, or immediately if a vacancy is experienced for another reason. And we're going to ensure, as AIDD requires, that the council is free from potential conflicts by changing the requirement that 13 council members be appointed by the governor from the area boards, but instead require that the governor look at the geographic diversity of the council and appoint people from throughout California so that we have that geographic diversity represented on the council. The last piece that I'll mention is that currently there are some state law provisions that limit who the executive director of the council can hire. Sometimes the governor's allowed to appoint staff to positions. Other times, for example, and we're suggesting eliminating those requirements so that the executive director of the council appoints all of the positions, all of the staff that work for the council, as opposed to an outside entity. So with that, what we want to do is hear from all of you about ideas you have. I want to just remind everyone that what we're going to do is ask for the names of the first 5 people that want to provide comment, and then we'll call on you one at a time. We're asking that people limit their remarks to 2 or 3 minutes so that we can hear everybody who is who wants to participate. And if we continue to hear lots of people come onto the call, we'll take a break in a half hour or so and sort of just do a brief summary of the reasons we're here so that everybody's starting from the same information piece. So with that, are there people that want to provide some input?
Do you want me to go ahead and open the lines or just give instruction on how they can
ask the first 5 people to
say their names,
and then we'll call on them.
Okay, unfortunately, there's no way for me to field that.
No, I'm not asking.
We're going to do that.
Do it. We're doing that. So just open the lines and we'll do that.
Okay.
Please state your name if you'd like to make a comment, and then we're just going to write down the first 5 names and go in order. And we'll do the process again.
Okay, all the lines should be open.
Vacaville, California.
Could you say that again, please?
Renee Keys, Vacaville.
Renee.
Vacaville? Renee from Vacaville.
Renee from Vacaville.
Next name, please. Hold 1 second while we get some other names. Other people who'd like to get in the queue?
Laura Larson from Redding, California.
Laura from Redding. Thank you. Others? Okay, why don't we go back to Renee, and this is your 2 to 3 minutes to make your comment, please.
Hi, my question, I guess, or comment is regarding the Lanterman Act and definitions, regional center, area board definitions of developmental disability. I see that there may be some conflict between a definition, which is now mental retardation is intellectual disorder, and the federal definition of developmental disability. I'm needing some help on that. Will that be resolved?
So this is Catherine speaking. You're right that the federal definition of developmental disability is really a functional definition, which says you have to have generally a significant lifelong impairment in 3 out of 7 major activities.
Right.
And the state definition is much more categorical. So to be eligible for regional center services, you have to have a specific condition, or you have to require services that are similar to what a person with an intellectual disability would need. This was not an area of compliance finding, and it's not going to be addressed as part of the resolution of this.
Okay, yeah, I was just, my question was just, I guess what should we look at as the real definition? State or federal?
It depends on, definitions, as they often do, depend on the specific service that you're seeking. So if you want regional center services, you have to look at the definition that's in the Lanterman Act. If one wanted SSI benefits, there would be a different definition of what is an intellectual disability. So it really becomes program specific and unfortunately can be quite confusing.
Right, and like I said, my question is actually really quite simple, and I'll cut it there. From what I understand, federal, regional center, whatever, developmental disability and mental retardation are two different definitions. Regional center, from what I understand, and area board is not following the real definition. Regional centers and area boards, from my experience, because I have a disabled child, they're using developmental disability as mental retardation, which actually causes a problem because regional center already has a category for mental retardation. So if someone else is applying for the 5th category, they are told that you can't apply because the person is not mentally retarded. So that's where the conflict comes in, is that who's going to follow the right? Is mental retardation going to be a developmental disability, or is it going to be called intellectual disorder? From what I'm seeing is that across the board, regional center or federal, developmental disability is a developmental disability, and mental retardation is now changed to intellectual disorder. So
you're right that some of the laws have changed to refer to things as intellectual disability. You're correct, and thank you for your comments. I do want to just point out that this is the findings were just about the state council. There weren't any findings about the regional center system, including who's eligible. There's nothing in the findings that the federal government made that would in any way change what regional centers provide or your right to get services from regional centers and so forth. So so we're clear about that.
Yeah, I was just addressing.
So I think I did
see in the council's finding on the Lanterman Act. So if somebody could inform me about what the findings relate to in the Lanterman Act.
Okay, so the Lanterman Act is a good question. The Lanterman Act has many subparts. One of the subparts is about regional center, what we call the entitlement to services, the things you can get from regional centers. A different part of the Lanterman Act, the Welfare and Institutions Code, is about the State Council on Developmental Disabilities and the Area Board. So the only part that we're talking about for purposes of this discussion is the State Council and the Area Boards.
Gotcha, okay. All right, thank you so much.
Laura
Ready?
Laura Larson.
Yes. My comment is that I believe that the area boards and the design of the area boards in the Lanterman Act in terms of their systemic advocacy is a very valuable service. And I was wondering if your committee is pursuing separate funding from the state for that particular function.
Well, I was just going to answer. At this stage, we are very focused on responding to the directives, essentially, for the corrective action plan for the council. There are a lot of questions about the unity of the state council with its area board offices, and that we are all sort of operating and providing the same directions from the council in concert with the area board offices. The short answer to your question is no. There is no separate exploration at this point for other sources of funding for other advocacy activities other than what is already being carried out under the contracts that we currently have.
So, Laura, it's Catherine Blakemore. I also one of the activities that's allowed by the Federal DD Act is for the council and its regional offices to engage in systemic advocacy. And so there was not a finding that the council couldn't do that. So I would believe that the council can continue to engage in systemic advocacy, and I think all of us who have been involved in this process would agree that that's a valuable service.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that in trying to resolve these issues that the actual community board members' function may be lost in trying to respond to the federal concerns. And it was always my experience that so much of the systemic advocacy is fed from the local experience. And so that's my concern, that those boards might be lost, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there someone else that would like to get in the queue to speak? And if so, could you identify your name and where you're from?
Hi, this is Martin Weil from Sonoma, California.
Trina Wade from San Diego.
From San Diego?
Yes. Trina Wade.
What's the name of the person from San Diego?
From San Diego, would you please repeat your name?
Trina.
Trina, thank you, Trina. Anyone else want to get in the queue?
Robin Adams Dinner from Porterville.
Could you say your name again?
Robin from Porterville.
Robin from Porterville. Okay, we got it. Anyone else?
Martin Weil from Sonoma.
Perfect. We've got you, Martin. So why don't we have three people in the queue, Martin, followed by Trina, followed by Robin. So Martin from Sonoma, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks very much for your time. I am also currently the chair of Area 4 Board, so I couch my remarks with that hat on. I'm concerned, and I understand that you're under enormous pressure to get this done, and I wouldn't know what I would do in your place. But I'm concerned about the process that has been pretty much behind closed doors, and perhaps given the time constraints, that was the only way that this could be done. And secondly, I very much want to echo what the prior speaker said, that I'm deeply concerned that while on paper it may look like you're maintaining some semblance of local and community representation in the new structures that you're proposing in your preliminary report, it seems to me that everything is getting very centralized. The Lanterman Act was quite specific about creating local community-based advisory panels to do oversight, capacity building, and systemic change. And I really don't, regardless of how this has to go, I would very much like to be reassured that that function is not thrown out. And whether that means, as the prior speaker said, that this is going to require funding other than that the feds will provide, I don't want to see that overlooked. Thank you.
Okay, and I want to just make, Catherine speaking, a couple of comments. One, there is a strong belief in the importance of engaging the community. As Mark said, this has all happened very quickly, but now we're at the point in the process before any final decisions are made to make sure that we do a good job of reaching out to the community. This is the very first sort of listening session, and there's a plan for doing a number of more of them in different ways. So we absolutely agree with you. And the second is everyone that has participated in developing the initial planning and thinking agrees that having local advisory bodies is very important, that contributes both to the richness of the plans that the state develops, it contributes to the ability to do systems advocacy, and so forth. So from our perspective, we think there's a way to continue local advisory boards and to have those boards continue to have input into what the state council does, both at the state level as well as the local level. So with that, I think we're going to move on to Trina, who I think is from San Diego.
Yes, and I'm with San Diego People First. My question is in regards to the advocacy activities. You mentioned that the report stated that there was some overlap between protection and advocacy and state council. So what specific issues does that involve, and how are you going to correct those? Because the local advocacy, the trainings the area board currently does are very, very beneficial, and the support that we receive to get those done is very important, on a grassroots level. And so how do you anticipate that changing?
Sure. Thank you, Trina, for the important comments. So when they talk about the overlap, they're not talking about overlap in training. We have every reason to believe the area boards or the regional offices of the council will continue to do the kinds of training that they're currently doing because people in the community think that is valuable, continue to provide support of local self-advocacy groups because that's currently a piece of the state plan. The parts that the feds might say need to be thought through is if you're representing someone at a hearing or that kind of work, then who should be the primary person doing that representation, and that's something we're continuing to think about. But the examples you gave, which were examples about training and supporting local self-advocacy groups, we don't anticipate will change.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we're on to Robin from Porterville.
Now, my question had to do with the overlap between DRC and the area boards in regards to advocacy as well. And you spoke about representations at hearings. Was that the only area that the feds had issue with? And my other question is, Catherine, you oversee disability rights of California as well?
Are you asking if I work at Disability Rights California? Yes?
Yes.
No?
No, you don't. You have nothing to do with them?
No, I work for them.
You work for
As
Disability
part of the State
Rights.
Council on Developmental Disabilities, I think it's important to know that the federal partners of Disability Rights California and the University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities participate and are members of the council.
Okay, so I just question as to maybe that might be where people kind of see a conflict of interest when you have a state council that's its own entity and disability rights that's its own entity, but yet you have somebody from DRC that sits on the board of state council. That's just my question.
It's an interesting point, but what the federal government expects is that because the federal government provides funding for the Protection and Advocacy Agency and provides funding for the state councils and provides funding for the university centers for excellence, that they want all three of those entities to be working together, including that both the Protection and Advocacy Agency and the University Centers for Excellence are represented on the council so that there can be coordinated kinds of approaches. So that was a decision. That's a decision that's really made at the federal level.
Okay. Was there any issue that the feds had as far as advocacies provided in the developmental centers?
So I think that's a somewhat different issue where the federal government didn't understand initially what the contracts were about. So it sounds like you know, Robin, that the clients' rights advocates at the developmental centers are paid for out of state funds with and they provide clients' rights advocacy at the developmental centers. So a piece of the response that's being drafted explains how that's a separate state function that doesn't direct the federal work, and so that's sort of how that issue is being handled now, and that'll go in a document that's going to the federal government.
Okay.
So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so let's create another queue. Who else would like to ask a question or make a comment? Please state your name. Any other comments? Any other questions? Maybe this is a good time to recap for people who have come in on the call after we got started.
Okay, so let's see if we can do it somewhat briefly, because we mostly want to hear from all of you that are on the call as opposed to just talking all the time. So the federal government did a review of California State Council, and they found areas of noncompliance. And the State Council is required to submit a corrective action plan, and that plan has to address 4 areas, and Olivia's going to walk through what those 4 areas are.
So the 4 areas of corrective action were regarding how the State Council creates its budget and distributes the monies that it has. And that includes the ways in which we support our area offices and how funding is allocated to those offices, making sure that we use our state funds in a way that's allowable by the federal government, since they are the source of all of our monies. In terms of hiring staff, they clarify that they want to make sure that the State Council operates as its own independent agency, and that the State Council Director has the hiring authority for the area board offices, and that the governor may not hire our staff. In regards to membership, the federal review was concerned about the process and our timeliness for appointments to the council, noting that there were long delays and unfilled vacancies on the council. And there was perceived conflict of interest for area board members to be representatives on the council. The last area that they requested attention to be paid is the State Council leadership and activities. And here they were focused on that the State Council and the area boards operate from its planning processes, meaning the state plan, all the way to how it carries out its activities as a unified council. They also identified, as we just spoke about, some of the concerns around the overlap of protection and advocacy activities, Disability Rights California, and some of the area board duties. We just also want to reiterate from your important questions that that this action is specific to the roles and the responsibilities under the Lanterman Act for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. It has no bearing on who and how services are delivered through the regional center system in California. that it is recognized that the State Council plays a valuable role in providing advocacy activities throughout the state, but the federal government is seeking clarification around those advocacy activities, but there's consensus that systems advocacy is an important role that the Council plays, and that we communicate and differentiate the roles and responsibilities of the advocacy activities that are carried out by Disability Rights California and the Council. So at this time, we would welcome again your questions and comments. If you would again queue up, that really has helped us so far, and thank you.
Hello, this is Linda from Los Angeles.
Linda from Los Angeles. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question or comment? Okay, Linda, please. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that the lack of comments is not lack of interest, but the way my group read your announcement was that we would call in and listen, and so I didn't solicit any kind of comments. I'm sorry, because we certainly do support the State Council and the individual representation in our local, through our local area boards and the good work that's being done, and the Family Resource Centers Network of California offers any support that we can give toward that continuing.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Actually, the purpose of the listening session was for us to listen to you, not for you to listen to us. And so we really wanted to take the beginning to explain the issues that we're facing and give people a chance to comment. And so the listening part is actually us listening to you, and then we'll be summarizing people's comments and concerns and providing that to the executive committee, which meets tomorrow. I also want to take this opportunity for people who weren't on the call when we started, that the council is really in the middle of its process in terms of responding to the federal report and their findings. As I mentioned before, a committee met during January with key members of the council, people from the administration, the governor's office, to try to work through a possible approach. We've talked some about the proposed approach that we're proposing. The executive committee has to make a decision tomorrow on what to submit to the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities by the 14th. But it's the council itself on March 20th that has to make the decisions on how we will move forward. And this is the first opportunity for broad community input into this process. There will be more opportunities, and the council meeting itself will be able to make comments also. So I just wanted to clarify that, and please, we want to listen to what people have to say here. So this wasn't intended for us just to talk and to be listened to.
Linda, hi, it's Catherine Blakemore. I also just wanted to point out that one of the things we're really striving to do is to ensure that we still have a local presence, that local council offices can continue to do the kinds of good work that they're doing now. That's come up several times, and so, and I will say that AIDD, when they were out doing the review, recognized explicitly that in a state the size of California, that you do have to have a local presence given how geographically diverse we are, how ethnically and language diverse we are. So, you know, some of this is really just about finding the way through that, but to ensure that we have a local presence and that local what we now call area boards, which we'll be calling local council offices, will continue to exist and do the kinds of work that they're doing currently.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to make a comment?
Can I make an additional
Somebody
one?
might be on a phone, and if you could mute it when you're not speaking, that would be great. It sounds like a cell phone somebody's driving, maybe.
This is Trina.
Sounds like somebody's dragging their microphone or their mic is rubbing against something. That's better, thank you. Did somebody else want to comment?
Can I make an additional comment? This is Trina from San Diego.
Hi, Trina. Please.
In regards to the hiring of staff, what corrective actions do you guys have in place now, and how is that going to change your turnover rate and stuff with your within your staffing?
Yeah. Well, yeah. According to the Federal Developmental Disabilities Act, is very clear that the governor appoints the council. The council hires an executive director, and the executive director hires the staff. In California, the Land Act actually mandates that there be deputy director positions within the council, and it gives the governor the authority to appoint deputy directors to those positions. I'm the deputy director of policy and planning, and I was appointed by the governor. This is actually in conflict with the DD Act. As I said, the DD Act requires that the executive director have the authority to hire staff. And so the governor's office has indicated a willingness to forego the appointment authority that's currently in statute. So we will be recommending that the Lanham Act be revised so that the governor will no longer have appointment authority for council staff, so that the council can create deputy director positions, and the executive director can hire the deputies that the executive director wants. Also, area board directors are currently recommended by the local area board, and that recommendation has to be approved both by the executive director of the council and the council itself. Again, this interferes with the ability of the executive director to hire who the executive director wants. So we would be proposing a change in the Lanham Act, the executive director be able to hire the directors of the regional offices of the area boards. The executive directors who are in place would stay in place, but as new people are hired into these positions, it would be the executive director of the council that would be able to hire. The executive director would not need the approval of the council to make those hiring decisions.
Thank you, Mark.
All right.
There's someone else that would like to provide some comment?
This is Robin in Porterville again.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, I was just curious as to how it was going to be presented to AIDD, the role of the CRAs at the DCs, because the advocating that we do here in the DCs is very different than what is done out in the community.
Yeah, in the response, it's mostly explaining that this is a contract with the state, and that we're not using federal funds to do this, and that it exists under a state plan objective, which is goal to objective D. And so we're actually getting what's called leveraged money from the state to expand our sphere of influence in the developmental centers. And that our work in the developmental centers helps us to be involved in the transition process that's currently underway from services in developmental centers services in the community. So I think by and large that's how we are approaching it. We believe that in their report, as was mentioned earlier, it was the people from AIDD who came here were confused about what the contract was for, and so we think by clarifying that, we'll hopefully be okay. All of this really depends. We'll come with a response to AIDD, and AIDD will respond to us to tell us if the response to the various findings is good enough for them. And so it's a process where we are after they respond to our submission. Is there somebody else who has a question or a comment?
Trina from San Diego again.
Keep the lines open.
Right, so I
Pending any additional comments or questions. We will keep this line open and available until.
In regards to the budgets, this is Trina from San Diego. In the corrections that you're making on your budget, can you go over that in a little more detail or recap it again?
The budget items. So Trina wants some more explanation of the findings on the budget items.
Bear with me for a minute. I just want to pull out some notes. The budget items clearly had to do with, well, first and foremost, that whenever you are a recipient of federal dollars, it comes with a number of rules and checks and balances of how you're allowed to spend those dollars. And the council was found not in compliance with some of the rules that are required by the federal government in the management of their funds. So that was one important aspect. Secondly, that the manner in which we generated our budgets it was not clear that the relationship between the activities that were being carried out by the area boards in regards to the state plan and how we were spending our dollars. So we will need to provide additional clarity in that area. Also, with regards to how you develop a budget, so that it's not that an area office is simply allocated a certain amount of dollars, but we have to demonstrate that the allocation of the dollars to any area is closely linked to the achievement of specific state plan goals and objectives. And finally, we also need improvements in terms of monitoring our own accountability for the dollars and how we expend those dollars. I hope that clarifies it a little bit for you. I do not have the details of it, and I don't know that we have the full details. At this point, we sort of present to them our overarching plan and ways that we're going to go about it. But do you have additional information, Mark, that you might share?
I do want to mention, Olivia was correct in her summary of this. I do want to mention that since AIDD visited a little over a year ago, the council has made a lot of progress in terms of oversight of the budget process. The council formed an administrative committee. The administrative committee has met 8 or 10 times in the last year, and really has been looking at the state council budget and expenditures in detail. The council has and approved the budget for the next year. So the budget area is fairly solid, we feel, at this point.
Okay.
There's one thing on the information sheet I want to point out, which is the AIDD had objections for the council being required to fund the area boards. Now, this sounds a little scary, but it's actually not. It's sort of similar to the deputy director situation. I'm a deputy director, and in statute, the state statute creates deputy director positions. AIDD says, no, that's state interference with the council authority to create its own organizational structure. So we can take that out of the Lanterman Act, but, quite frankly, I believe we're still going to have deputy directors. It's just the council will be able to make that decision. And it's the same way with funding of area boards. Why do we need a requirement in law to fund area boards when they're part of the council? And since they're part of the council, we fund them. So to AIDD, this looks like interference to have it actually in statute that the council fund the area boards. But for us, the council and the area boards have been one organization for over 10 years now, and of course the council funds area boards, so we don't need that in statute. And a lot of what we'll be having to respond to is actually making fixes like that. So the council has the authority to use its federal grant in the ways that it chooses. And I hope you've heard over and over here that there's tremendous support within the council and the people working on this and the public that you've been hearing for the work of the area boards.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark, for explaining that.
Anybody else?
When appropriate, I would like to go ahead and join the queue. This is George Aguilar.
You go, George. George, for those of you that don't know, is the current chair of the State Council and who's been working almost full-time, although he has another full-time job on the plan for correction. So welcome, George.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I also want to extend my gratitude for everybody who has signed in and been listening in, as well as providing comments. Tagging on to the comments that Mark just expressed, I wanted to go ahead and echo those sentiments and assure those of you that are listening that as the chair of the council and also the chair of this MTARS committee, I have not heard any discussion about the lack of respect and honor that is due to, one, our staff, but more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, to all of the volunteers across the state that have been supporting the efforts that we do for our constituency, our community. So there's a lot of support. There's a lot of understanding that change can be scary and it can be difficult. However, I want to reassure everyone that having our council across the state is absolutely important and definitely not on the table as far as we are concerned. It's just going to be a change in how things are named, how we execute and report, and how we continue to provide the services across the state to our constituency. We are about advocacy. We are about expressing or sharing the information across the state that people need to know to get the services and to get the information that they need to be their own strongest self-advocates, and that part is not about to change.
Thanks very much, George. Are there other comments or questions?
This is Lisa in Butte County. I have a question.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, are the composition of the local area boards going to change? For example, the positions that exist in the area board, some are appointed by local governing bodies. Some are appointed by the governor's office. Are the area boards, their membership, is that going to change under this review?
So that's one of the things that we don't know at the current time is what we know there will be local community advisory boards because we all agree those are really essential to engaging people and in local work and, you know, really valuing, as George said, the expertise that volunteers bring. The exact process by which people are appointed isn't known yet, and it's something that we welcome your input on and, you know, we'll continue to keep people informed about.
So if you have a comment to make about that, please do.
This is Joyce from Elk Grove. I have a question. I came in late.
Say your name again, please.
Joyce.
Joyce.
You're going to need to speak up, Joyce.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. It's about the local community advisory boards that you just mentioned. So that will be the replacement for the area boards? I need clarification.
So I think what you see is some changes in the terminology of how we're calling things because from the federal perspective, it's very important that we look like an integrated system and that we work as an integrated system. So as we've been talking about, what we currently call area boards will be state council local offices, our regional offices, and then we will have local advisory boards to those state council regional offices. So the terminology is changing, but I guess I do want to reiterate again that everyone who's working on this, like George said and Mark and Olivia have said, is we all respect the fact that the local work is very important, and we want to ensure that whatever changes we're making, that local work will continue, even though we're a little less certain right now about the appointment process, and there's some other changes, but that the local regional offices, which we currently call area boards, will continue to have that strong presence in local communities throughout California.
And frankly, the council is now going to be doing a better job explaining the relationships and how our work is furthered by having these local offices. So it behooves us to be able to be clearer and more specific in our communications around the relationship of all of the area offices and the critical work of the council itself.
Thank you.
Are there any others who have a question or a comment?
So as we indicated, we are here and available to listen and hear your comments and questions, and we will remain on the line until 3 o'clock. So please feel free if you have anything further you'd like to say. This is an opportune time.
This is Tobias from Sonoma.
Thanks for joining us.
I think, would somebody want to just speak from Sonoma?
This is Tobias from Sonoma. And just to let everybody know, I am the CRA out here at Sonoma Development Center. I just wanted to talk a little bit about representing clients in writ cases and how the new trailer bill has changed the landscape somewhat, and how that I've been working with protection and advocacy at times to help people get out of here at a more rapid pace than normally would be the case. and at times working hand in hand to make sure that regional centers are being honest with the services that are being offered. And so I just wanted to put that out there because often I've heard before, working that it wasn't always the best thing to be working so hand in hand with protection and advocacy. And I find that to be something that I have issue with because I always want to give my clients the best services that I can. And so I don't have any problem with it whatsoever, and I just want to put that out there.
Thanks for the comment. I think we all value the work that you're doing and the other clients' rights advocates are doing.
Are there others who would wish to comment? Operator, we seem to be losing people. Could you let us know how many people are on the call?
A few people are dropping off here at about 38 right now.
Thank you, Christy.
You bet.
This is Dawn in Ukiah.
Who is it in Ukiah? I'm sorry?
This is Dawn.
Dawn, okay.
Is a copy of the draft corrective action plan available for review online?
No, the draft is not online. The draft is, still a working product, and the executive committee will be reviewing it tomorrow.
So would it be in the packet?
No, it's not in the packet.
When will it be available, do you think?
This is Joyce again from Sacramento
County. When we submit the corrective action plan will be generally available. If you want a copy of it for comment, you could send an email maybe, Don. And again, I want to emphasize that, the corrective action plan has different levels to it. The corrective action plan will go finding by finding by finding by finding, responding to what AIDD had to say. And some of our response is that your finding is incorrect. We are currently in compliance with the Federal DD Act, and this is why. Some of our response is we agree with your finding, at least in part, and this is what we have been doing to correct that, and now we think we are in compliance. There's another level where we have to take administrative actions, not legislative actions, but administrative actions in order to comply. One of their issues was that the State Council and the area board need to work better together, and that would be great. So we have to, explain how we're going to do that. One of the findings was around the creation of the state plan, and we describe how we're going to do that, how we've done it in the past, and how we're going to do that in the future. Then there's other findings that require a legislative solution, and we've talked about that.
Thank you, Stephanie, for helping me.
The ones that require a legislative solution or changes to the council bylaws, these are things that must be approved by the State Council on March 20th. We can't go ahead and do that without the council. I mentioned public input that will be available over the next month and a half until then and actually at the council meeting.
Thank you, Mark, and I do want to thank you because I did notice that a lot of the MTARS documents are online, so I really appreciate it.
Great, yeah.
Mark, this is George Aguilar. May I jump in again?
Please.
Greetings again. I did want to mention, as has been discussed during the course of this presentation, and by the way, you folks are doing a great job. I'm making a point to just listen. And I know a lot of other council members have been calling in and just listening as well because we're all interested. But the documents that are being produced are changing on a weekly, if not daily basis, being refined and vetted, and they're working documents that then will be analyzed by a committee to make final revisions and changes and finalized to be submitted. We're dealing with a very, very short time frame, but we have done as much as we can to be as transparent as we can with our constituency. To that end, there is a committee page for the MTARS committee, and I know some of you have seen it, perhaps others have not. But on our web page, the council web page, there's a link on the very front of it to the MTARS committee page. And we have done what we can to provide all of the information and PDF documents that are downloadable so that you can inform yourself. And in the web page, there's also a connect to the executive committee web page. Tomorrow, the executive committee is meeting to review the latest versions of the documents that are intended to be sent out by the end of this week. The executive committee must post public notice and does have a packet available on the executive committee webpage that includes earlier versions of the drafts of the attachments that are going to go with the cover letter to be sent out. So there's an earlier version of information that is available there. However, the most up-to-date version should be available and posted on the website by close of business on February 14th.
Okay, thank you, George.
You bet. I'll go back to listening now. You guys are doing a great job.
Thanks. Are there any other questions or comments? Quarter of an hour left. Paul?
This is Joyce again from Sacramento County, and it's concerning, and I don't want to keep asking, but I am a parent of a new consumer, and I'm trying to get clarification on many things, but is the role of the current area board system advisory?
The role of the current area board system advisory.
We call two things area boards. One is the board itself, which are volunteer appointees. They're called the area boards on developmental disabilities. And then the staff of the local council office, we also call the area boards. So the role of the volunteer advisory board is advisory, though in statute they do have some limited powers to recommend an executive director for the area board and to recommend an appointee to the council. Otherwise, their role is purely advisory.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
And again, as you've heard before, this advisory function is very, very important to the council and how it functions. It's important to the council's regional office, which we call area boards, and it's important to the council's operations in Sacramento too, because these advisory committees called area boards, are really in touch with their local communities. And the council to function really needs to be in touch with the local communities, both to receive information and to give information. So don't want to underplay it, even though they're advisory in nature, they play a very important function within the council.
Thank you.
Are there others?
We're open and ready for business. If anyone has questions or comments that they would like to discuss at this time, we would welcome them.
Let me repeat the contact information if you want to keep up with what's happening or have questions. We're posting the significant documents on the council website at scdd.ca.gov. That brings you to the council's homepage, and there you just click on the MTARS committee. There, the major documents that we receive from AIDD and that we send to AIDD are listed. And that will continue to be updated. You can send email comments and concerns or questions to mtars@scdd.ca.gov. That's M as in Mark, T as in Tom, A as in Apple, R as in Robin, S as in Sam, at scdd.ca.gov. You can also call and ask for Roberta Newton, the Interim Executive Director, or myself, Deputy Director, at 916-322-8481. That's 916-322-8481. And this call, all of the silent listed on our website, on the MTARS page. Is there anybody else who wants to comment?
Mark, this is Trina from San Diego again, so that we're not sitting here with empty phones. I'd like to thank you guys very, very much for providing the input.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
It's been really helpful. Could you kind of explain, I know it probably isn't related to this, the oversight abilities that the council has for the regional centers? I know it's not really kind of related to this, but that's something that I've been curious about. How do they conduct the business of oversight?
That really goes to the systemic question that we raised before, that we discussed before about, and those functions about how the council and its local offices do that, is something that we don't, and, the function isn't really going to change. So the council has a systems role of making sure that systems work effectively for people with developmental disabilities, and that would include looking at regional centers and schools and health plans and everything else that might be part of that system.
Okay. And then with the overlap between protection and advocacy and the area boards, you've obviously been in contact with protection and advocacy. How are you going to navigate that and resolve that conflict?
So this is Catherine speaking. I think your question was, how are we going to resolve the conflict between the area boards and the Protection Advocacy Agency? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the overlap conflict, where they're saying that they're overlapping.
I think what it means is, working through what is the council allowed to do. The federal government is clear about a number of functions: training, supportive self-advocacy, systemic work. I always believe that a piece of systemic work can involve individual advocacy that's leading to fixing a systems problem, and so I think it's one of the areas that will require some ongoing discussion. But I don't believe we're planning to propose anything to the federal government as a piece of this corrective action plan that defines that.
And with the rewriting of the contracts and stuff, we've taken care of all that problem, right?
Could you speak louder, please?
With the rewriting of those contracts, the advocacy contracts, we solved a lot of that problem, right? In terms of the
planning to rewrite the advocacy. I think you're talking about the CRA, Clients' Rights Advocacy contract. I don't think there's a plan to rewrite that.
No, the
Mark,
grant proposal for specifically the SAN. Was that part of all of this?
I'm sorry, is that Trina?
Yes.
What was the question about this?
Well, when we rewrote the contract for support for the SAN, did that handle some of these problems that we're addressing now? Or was that something totally unrelated?
I think it's unrelated.
Okay.
I think we have about 5 minutes left, so if you are dying to make a comment or ask a question, now would be a good time, because we'll be ending the call at 3 o'clock, which is in about 5 minutes.
Catherine, Mark, and Olivia. This is George again.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, I just wanted to go ahead and express gratitude to everybody, including yourselves, for this listening session. As you mentioned before, I do have some other work commitments on the daily grind, so I will be leaving now. But I appreciate the work that you've done and the folks that have called in and listened. And I just wanted to reiterate what you said at the beginning, that there will be continued listening sessions and outreach opportunities for everyone to engage. So thanks again for everything that you're doing, and to those people out there, everything that they're doing.
And George, I would just like to echo, this is Molly. I'm the vice chair of the council, and I just want to thank Olivia, Catherine, and Mark for making the council look very good today. I'm very interested in hearing what people have to say, so thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Enough, okay.
I'm going to go ahead and hang up. If you need me, let me know, and hopefully Mark and George and I can summarize what happened today at the exact committee tomorrow. See ya!
Okay. Take care.
You've got about 5 participants remaining.
Thank you, and I think it's just about 3 o'clock if my clock is correct.
Yes.
It is. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up.
For joining. Remember to look at the State Council website that Mark has given out several times if you want up-to-date information. And I think other opportunities for public comment will also be posted there and sent out through the various means that the notice of this was sent out. So thanks again for all the good comments and your interest, and we look forward to hearing further from you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.